Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full stack developers.
Visual Studio Code is a powerful IDE that supports various development environments, and it is not that slow compared to text editors, and it has a simple UI. Of course, in Java projects, it takes some time to load due to the project configuration. You can download the installation file from the official Visual Studio Code site. You can download the installation file that matches your client environment. If you access the site in a Windows environment, you can download the X installation file right away, and if you are in a Linux environment, you can download the deb or RPM package file right away. Double-clicking the installation file will start the installation, and in Ubuntu, double-clicking the downloaded deb file will launch App Center. In Ubuntu, deb files for third-party applications downloaded externally are also installed through App Center or Package Manager. Ubuntu's App Center can search for and install applications in the repository, and Visual Studio Code can also be installed through the repository, but it supports slightly older versions, and problems occur when inputting languages of more than 2 bytes. It is recommended to download and install the deb file from the official Visual Studio Code site. Let's run Visual Studio Code. When you run Visual Studio Code for the first time after installing it, the Customize screen that sets AI features, themes, etc. will be displayed first. If you ignore the Customize settings screen and close it, the Customize settings screen will appear again every time Visual Studio Code is run. You have to go back to the Welcome screen to prevent the Customize settings screen from appearing anymore. The Welcome screen has menus related to starting and creating projects, but they are not very useful when actually used. Let's set it so that it does not appear at startup. Let's pin Visual Studio Code to the dashboard. To optimize the video resolution, I will change the screen of Visual Studio Code to 16:9 resolution. The environment settings of Visual Studio Code are provided as a GUI screen by default. Since the settings of the GUI screen show all the settings including the default settings, it can be difficult to find the settings because of the pressure of scrolling. Paradoxically, it can be more unintuitive. Even after scrolling for a long time, the settings screen is still at the front. The settings of Visual Studio Code are managed internally as JSON. I prefer to set them directly in the JSON file. Due to time constraints, instead of writing the settings directly, I will copy the settings that I personally prefer from the Coding Gicha site. I will paste the settings that I copied. The font of the development tool should be a fixed width font to improve readability. It is also recommended to use a fixed width font when selecting by column in multi-editing. The D2 Coding and Nanum Gothic Coding are fixed width fonts for Korean developers. Korean characters are wider than ASCII code characters, but the fixed width Korean font adjusts the Korean code characters to twice the width of the ASCII code characters. I personally do not recommend a ligature font. For example, if characters entered as an exclamation mark and an equal sign are ligatured, They are displayed as a slash drawn on the equal sign, which ultimately leads to confusion as to whether it is a two-character symbol or a single-character symbol. I think developers should avoid this technique because it is difficult to find out if they accidentally use the wrong code. The minimap makes it easy to see the current location in the code, but if you have a limited screen size like a laptop, it is also a good idea to hide the minimap. I will set it to display white space. I recommend setting it to prevent typos and other mistakes. Visual Studio Code automatically converts tabs to spaces, but I prefer tabs for indentation, so I'll go with false. When there is a lot of content in the file you are working on in the editor, a scroll appears, but in Visual Studio Code, it appears and disappears when the mouse is over it or when the line of content changes. It steals your attention. The scroll bar in Visual Studio Code is a translucent overlay scroll bar, so even if you always show the scroll bar, the workspace does not decrease. There is a convenient function that stickily fixes the parents when the indentation depth in the editor increases. However, it can be confusing when scrolling or moving focus. You can disable sticky scroll. The file tree in Explorer also has sticky scroll enabled, but I prefer to disable it. Visual Studio Code has Emmet style input enabled by default. When Emmet is enabled, abbreviated input in the form of CSS selector is automatically converted to HTML tags, which improves productivity. However, since the abbreviated format of Emmet disappears after the value entered with Emmet is converted to HTML tags, the advantages of Emmet are lost during maintenance. Rather, unintended conversions can occur repeatedly, which can worsen productivity. Personally, I prefer developing with templates such as Pug, which uses an abbreviated format, rather than inputting in this format. You can also set up the File Explorer to hide directories and files that actual developers do not use. .vs Code is a directory where project-specific configuration files are managed. Project configuration files are not often opened directly, and they are only used a little at the beginning of a project, and even then, they are set and shared by the project leader, so hiding them is more efficient because you can focus only on the actual development files. If you install the Toggle Excluded Files extension, you can easily show and hide hidden files by toggling them. I'll cover the extensions for Visual Studio Code in more detail next time. I'll also set the hidden files to search exclude. In Ubuntu OS, applications installed as deb files are managed by the software updater, and updates are also done through the software updater. Let's set the update mode to manual. If you don't set the update mode to manual, every time you run Visual Studio Code, it will check whether to update, and when you click Download Update, the deb file will be downloaded, which will only cause the hassle of reinstalling. And a badge will be shown at the bottom left, which will only distract your attention. You need to restart to reflect the update mode setting. When you save, a notification will pop up telling you to restart Visual Studio Code. Let's restart. The title bar shows information about the file you are currently working on, but if Command Center is set, it can feel a bit stuffy. I like it clean, so I will disable the setting. I will discuss Command Center later. If the information about the file you are currently working on is too much, the menu will be covered. The window title can be set to display the information you want. The default value is root name, profile name, and app name, but the root name is not very useful information as it is the workspace or project name. The profile name and app name are also unnecessary information. In particular, I prefer to use the default value of Active Editor short as Active Editor Medium, but this can make the path somewhat longer, so I prefer to set the title bar to have more space by excluding information that is not very useful. In Visual Studio Code, instead of creating a complicated project, you can simply open a folder to be managed as a project, and it will become a project folder. When checking whether to trust the project folder, if you check that you trust all files in the parent folder, you will no longer see a confirmation message when adding project folder. Visual Studio Code can manage project folders as a workspace, which I will explain next time. Let's open a file in the project folder. As a result of setting the window title to custom, only the name of the file you are working on is simply displayed. If you are managing multiple projects as a workspace, the project name will be displayed additionally in front. You can also activate Command Center by right-clicking on the title bar. Command Center can be useful when searching for files or moving to the desired file, but it always takes up a lot of space, and if the file path is long, it is not displayed and is hidden. Also, some of the menus in the title bar are hidden due to the narrow space. If you click on the Command Center area, you can search for files in the same way as when you press the Ctrl+P shortcut key. You can also see other additional functions, which can be executed by shortcut keys. In the development IDE, you will mainly work on the source code with the keyboard, but if you take your hands off the keyboard and move it to the mouse, find a menu, click, and then move your hand back to the keyboard, the rhythm may be broken. This is why I personally prefer shortcut keys. Let's disable Command Center again. Let's press the Ctrl+P shortcut key. You can quickly search for files without Command Center, and you can continue working without moving your hand from the keyboard, so the rhythm is less broken. And the title bar is also less stuffy. I will also set up shortcuts. Shortcut settings are also managed as JSON files. This time, I will copy my personally preferred shortcuts from the Coding Gicha site. Personally, when I want to work lightly and quickly in a script-based language that does not require compilation, I often use Sublime Text. I use the additional shortcut settings to match the key combinations as much as possible with Sublime Text. I will paste the shortcut settings that I copied. There is no default shortcut to convert text to uppercase or lowercase, so I will set it to be the same as the shortcut in Sublime Text. I will also add a shortcut to save all files I am working on. I will also add a shortcut to close all files except the one where the cursor is currently located. The shortcut to zoom in or out the screen and return it to the default ratio is Ctrl and 0 on the number pad, but this cannot be used on laptops and tankless keyboards because they do not have a number pad. I will add a shortcut to Ctrl-Alt-0. I will also create shortcuts to create a new file and a new folder. Since Ctrl-N and Ctrl-Shift-N are already registered shortcuts, I will set them to run only when the File Explorer has focus. I will set the shortcut to view the list of executable tasks in the workspace to Shift-Alt-T. When File Explorer is not in focus, let's try Ctrl-N. It will create an untitled file with no location specified. Shift-Ctrl-N will open another Visual Studio Code window. The shortcut for creating a file doesn't seem very useful. Let's move the focus to File Explorer. Move the cursor to the desired path, and type Shift-Ctrl-N to create a folder in that path. You can also create a file directly in the desired path with the shortcut. With the additional shortcut, you can now create folders and files directly without the help of the mouse. There are new file and new folder icons at the top right of the File Explorer. If you set them as shortcuts like me, you can hide them to avoid unnecessary menus taking away your eyes and making the screen feel cluttered. There is a remote host icon at the bottom left. If you don't work remotely, this is an unnecessary icon. Visual Studio Code is mostly monotone, but the remote host icon is particularly noticeable in a strong color that keeps your eyes on it. I will exclude the remote host. If there are menus in the status bar that you don't use, I recommend excluding them. If there are too many, it can be cluttered and distract your eyes. Unlike other IDS, Visual Studio Code does not provide menu icons for open, save, etc. This makes it minimal and simple, so you can focus more on the source code without being distracted. Also, when you see an icon, your hand will unconsciously go to the mouse while typing and click the icon with the mouse. If you move your hand back to the keyboard after clicking, it is easy to break the rhythm. If you minimize the icons and develop in a simple workspace, your eyes will be distracted less, the rhythm will be broken less, and the workspace will be more spacious, so you can focus more on the source code.
Thank you for watching.